Okay, I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on preparations for COP27. Before we begin, a couple housekeeping matters. This webinar is being delivered in English and French, and you can access your preferred language by using the globe icon, which is at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom toolbar. It says interpretation under it if your system is in English. Please add your name in the chat box and where you're joining from, so we all know who we're together with this morning. And we'll have a portion of the meeting that is question and answer session with the speakers. So we do encourage you to use the chat box as a place to put your questions, and then we'll bring them forward to the speakers. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Lucinda O'Hanlon. I'm the head of policy and strategy at Sanitation and Water for All. And today's webinar is about how our partnership is preparing for COP27. In a little bit more than a month, this meeting is going to be happening. It's being referred to as the Adaptation COP, and it's expected that there will be lots of focus on strengthening adaptation and resilience, limiting the impacts of climate change, facilitating a just transition, and increasing funding and collaboration for essential climate solutions. Water is expected to feature prominently at this year's COP meeting under the leadership of the government of Egypt. And we're very pleased that Dr. Imam Soliman, head of planning sector for the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, is joining this meeting today. Welcome, Dr. Imam. SWA is taking an active role in the COP27 preparations. We're part of the steering committee of the COP27 Water and Climate Pavilion. We're also coordinating with our partners to provide inputs to some other COP-related initiatives, including for the first time a COP flagship initiative on water called Action for Water Adaptation and Resilience, or AWARE. COP27 also includes for the first time a day dedicated to water in the official presidency program on the 14th of November. So there are plenty of entry points for us to come with our priorities and messages. SWA's focus has been prioritizing attention to the billions globally who still do not have access to basic services. These are the same communities who are experiencing the most severe impacts of climate change. And this is especially pertinent at a COP to be hosted on the African continent, where millions of these individuals live. To build community resilience of populations at risk, it's crucial to also understand whether they have access to water and sanitation. Our work has shown us that communities with reliable access to safe water and sanitation are better equipped to respond to climate change. Beyond adaptation, there are huge and untapped opportunities for mitigation by improving water supply and energy efficiency, and by ensuring, where possible, the use of renewable energy for water and sanitation operations. Another important aspect that SWA is focusing on is the importance of directing a fair share of climate financing to building the resilience of basic water supply and sanitation services. Not only the existing services, but the ones yet to be built. Through the work of SWA partners and the Secretariat, we can positively influence the inclusion of water supply, sanitation, and hygiene in climate negotiations at the national and global levels. And to do this, today we're seeking to enhance understanding about how the COP27 meeting fits in the global landscape, the efforts of the government of Egypt as the host, and what partners can do to engage at the national level. We will highlight national level activities to prepare COP delegations to attend the meeting, and will provide the opportunity to discuss how WASH stakeholders can brief their country delegations so that they're ready to discuss with other parties at COP27 how water and sanitation could be reflected in the COP outcomes. At this point, I'd like to transition our discussion to Dr. Imam and SWA's climate advisor, Jose Gesti. Jose will provide us with background information on COP27 that could help partners better understand what happens at a COP meeting, who attends, how to engage in the negotiations, while Dr. Imam will speak directly to Egypt's leadership, and particularly in providing opportunities for water to have a prominent role in the meeting through the Water Pavilion, the Water Day, and the AWARE initiative that I just mentioned. So Jose, over to you.
Thanks very much, Lucinda. Knowing that sometimes water supply, sanitation, and hygiene stakeholders lack a bit of background about the global climate processes, just in the next few slides, I want to provide a brief explanation so that our participants have a better idea of what is a COP, as you said, who attends to a COP, and what are the main things discussed there. So if I can have the next slide, please. Before explaining what is a COP, please let me go a little bit back and introduce and explain that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is abbreviated as the UNFCCC, established an international environmental treaty to combat climate change. And this happened already at what it was called the Earth Summit that it was held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. This convention entered into force in 1994, and at this point in 2022, the UNFCCC, the convention, has already 198 parties. Through this convention, a secretariat was also established and is called as well the UNFCCC. The headquarters are in Bonn, in Germany, and this secretariat is charged with supporting the operations of the UNFCCC, of the convention. So now that I have introduced the UNFCCC, both the convention and the secretariat, then is when we can say that the UNFCCC's supreme decision-making body is what is called the Conference of the Parties, abbreviated such as the COP. When the Conference of the Parties gather together, this is the biggest climate diplomacy event of the year, and the aim is to assess progress in dealing with climate change. The first COP took place in Berlin in 1995, and this year in November, Egypt will be hosting COP27. Now, I would like to make also a mentioning to the Paris Agreement, but before I do that, I will need to start by mentioning something which most of you will have heard of as well, which is the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was signed shortly after the convention in 1997. And it's important for you to see or to know that the Kyoto Protocol was the first implementation of measures under the convention, under the UNFCCC. The Kyoto Protocol then was superseded by the Paris Agreement that was born at COP21 in 2015 in Paris, and the Paris Agreement entered into force in 2016. You may know that the aim of the Paris Agreement is to limit global warming to less than 2 degrees, and if possible, to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Under the Paris Agreement, countries are committed to bring forward national plans explaining and setting out how much they would like to reduce their emissions. These plans are known as the nationally determined contributions, or simply abbreviated as the NDCs. Countries agreed that every 5 years they could be revising the NDCs and revising their ambition. But last year at COP26 in Glasgow, it was after certifying that the pledges to reduce emissions by countries were not enough, countries were encouraged to not wait the 5-year cycle of revisions of NDCs, but to work on the revisions already towards COP27. If I can have the next slide, please. So that was in relation to a little brief introduction to what is a COP. But now let's see who attends the COP. So since the first COP, as I mentioned, in Berlin in 1995, The UNFCCC, the convention, has gathered the international community together almost every year to assess and advance progress on tackling global warming. Each country brings its own delegation of politicians, negotiators, and experts to discuss and agree, and sometimes not agree, on a way forward with other countries. There are representatives of parties to the convention, and there are also few observer states. An example could be the Vatican. And the 2 weeks talks of a COP are also attended by thousands of observers and members of the press. As action on climate change has gained international attention, the COPs have grown in prominence, and you can see on the charts on the left that shows the overall total participants for the 3 categories that we are mentioning of participants. The representatives of parties to the convention plus the observer states on one side, the representatives of observer organizations on another part of the charts that you see, and then the members of the press. To let you know that parties to the convention are nation states, but also the European Union is a party to the convention. They have all ratified the convention and play full part in the negotiations at a COP. There are observer states, as I mentioned, that have not completed their ratification. Then observer states is not to be mistaken with observer organizations. Those are divided into the UN systems and specialized agencies, then also intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. All of these need to be previously accredited as observer organizations to be able to attend to a COP. These organizations have access to some of the plenary sessions and some of the deliberations around the draft outcome text, but not to the smaller informal discussions that take place at COP. So observer organizations, they can be close to the negotiators, but the negotiators meet in a separate room in what is called the blue zone of a COP. And then lastly, if I can have the next slide. So we've seen what it's a COP, we've seen who attends to a COP, and now for you to just get a brief idea of what is discussed at a COP. So ever since the first COP in 1995, COPs have been used to review what parties have achieved and also to measure progress. They are also where negotiations take place for the next round of emissions reductions, and also to discuss on issues such as adaptation and climate financing. COPs are vital means of monitoring the progress made so far and working out the next set of targets that need to be achieved in the future if we are to meet the objectives of the Paris Agreement. For you to get an idea of the key themes discussed at the COP, of what we are presenting on this slide, is the 4 objectives that the Egyptian presidency has set for COP27. The first one is on mitigation. So COP27 will be a moment for countries to fulfill their pledges and commitments towards delivering the objectives of the Paris Agreement, as we are mentioning, and also to enhance the implementation of the convention. Then, on adaptation, COP27 should witness enhanced global agenda for action on adaptation. The aim is placing adaptation actually at the forefront of global action. Then climate finance, the importance of adequacy and predictability of climate finance is key to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. And to this end, there is a need for enhanced transparency of finance flows and facilitated access to meet the needs of developing countries, especially African countries, less developed countries, and small islands development states. And fourth, the Egyptian presidency has set this 4 objectives on collaboration, and the aim here is that governments, the private sector, and civil society work in tandem to transform the way in which we all interact with our planet. So, as Lucinda has explained in her introduction remarks, water is really playing a big role this year, COP27 discussions, and we are honored to have with us Dr. Iman, who is the Egyptian focal point for COP27 in the Water Pavilion, So she will explain to us some features of the Water Pavilion as well as the flagship initiative Aware, and also some preparatory process through Cairo Water Week. So if we can then transition, and Dr. Iman, you're welcome to take the floor.
Okay, thank you. And actually, this is a very good opportunity for me to present the effort started with Egypt to have water on the top of the climate agenda. Actually, Egypt started to take the role to move water from the margin to the center of the climate conference. As you may know, the scarce countries and the African countries also in the region, in Arab region and in the Mediterranean area, they are suffering from the climate change. So we would like to bring water as a scarce countries on the top of the climate agenda. Egypt started to prepare for the COP27, starting from next month with Cairo Water Week on main theme, water at heart of climate actions, and would like to move from talking and from planning to action and to commitments. So during Cairo Water Week, we will prepare for several initiatives. We will have focus on Aware initiative, and we will finalize the agenda of the Water Pavilion and take maybe the messages from water community, and we will prepare ourselves for the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, inshallah. Next slide, please. Actually, I'd like to thank you as a SWA. You are part of the steering committee for the Water Pavilion, and you helped Egypt in different aspects in completing the Water Pavilion and different activities toward the COP27. For the Water Pavilion, Egypt takes the lead to continue the effort and to build on what we had achieved last year in Glasgow for the first Water Pavilion, and we formulated a steering committee from 5 countries, where we have Germany, we have Tajikistan, Netherlands, and UK and Egypt leading the effort with help of 5 organizations, SWA, among them FEO, the main partner, and also we have SIWI, we have AGWA, we have EMI, and both of us who worked for months to have the pavilion on a good shape, and we already started to talk with the organization team. We have 20 square meter pavilion in the blue zone, where we will have enough space either for networking, for technical session, and also for booths for maybe some successful stories to be disseminated in the pavilion. We also started to formulate task groups, and we put attention to the messages to negotiators. So we have a team from the steering committee working to formulate key messages and also to deliver those key messages to the leader and the summit leaders. We have working group, we have logistic team, where they did a fantastic job to make the pavilion is a brilliant one and to assure all the facilities for the participant. And also we have many groups for thematic topics, and recently we finalized the main theme, and we started the process of finalizing the final program, the day-to-day one. And we have with our colleague from SIWI a fantastic cooperation toward the fundraising, where we are able to finance the needed expenses to have the pavilion implemented with good and with enough logistic and attractive one. And at the end, we have communication and key messaging team. We have SWA working closely with us. We have AGWA, we have SIWI, so many technical team working on formatting messages and how we will deliver it. And also we are working how we can make the messages to be delivered to all climate community. Next, please. As I mentioned, we already finalized the main themes, where we tried to some extent follow last year procedures to discuss the presidency team ahead before the main program theme to enable the water community to interact with most of the high-level participants, and then we can convey our messages to those people, and they can reflect during the side events for the thematic day. And we finalize with the following program, where we will have our program started on 8th of November with finance climate resilience through investors in water. And we have our lead institute, African and Asian Development Bank with WRI. And we have for the second day, climate resilience and low carbon approaches, system and technologies, where we have ESCWA and UNESCO leading the organization of such a day. As the third day, we will have disaster risk reduction and sustainable city for improving livelihood. And we see this is a very important topic. We will have as a lead institute, UNDRR and UNESCO and IMI. For the fourth day, we will have climate smart agriculture and food security, adaptation and sustainability, which is important for the world, especially after the overall supply chain crisis. And we will have FAO and IMI on charge to supervise this day. For fifth day, we will have water and climate mitigation, adaptation and resilience and cooperation. We see cooperation on sectorial basis or on regional basis would be a good start for adaptation and resilience, where we will have Egypt as a Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, AGWA and GWB on the lead institute. Then we will have water, energy and the climate nexus. We will have UNDP and EDBF as a lead institute. After that, we will have water and biodiversity natural-based solution, which may be a solution for Africa. Most of African countries, they need some natural-based solution and as well low cost. We need to focus on the impact of several extreme weather events on either on coastal area or the water resources, and how we can find a natural-based solution to solve this action. We will have WWF and IUCN on the lead institute. After that, we will have inclusion and accelerating youth, indigenous and gender actions on climate change, and we would like to hear from different actors and those indigenous people, how they can be part of the solution. We will have GWB, AUC, and also SWA supporting this day. After that, we will have climate, water, and sanitation solution for health and sustainable development. Sure, SWA will have the lead, and also WHO, UNICEF, they will be the leading institute on such a day, and we would like to see a wonderful and interactive day, as sanitation is one of the main problems for Africa, and we call it African COP, and we would like to have a solution and solution for all African issues, or most of them. Last day will be a resolution day and roadmap for COP20, from COP27 to UN 2023 and COP28 events. We will have summarize and conclusion from different thematic days to be presented at last day, and how we will make the outcome in use, and how we will make it in focus. Also, at the same side, we will have a flagship initiative on water, and this is a first time for COP to have a water initiative. We worked through 5 months with all our partners, starting to have a dialogue, what is needed from different member states and also organizations and water communities. And at the end, we started to formulate water action for water adaptation and resilience, and our vision to make it inclusive, cooperative for water adaptation to support water and ecosystem and land management. We find within this week, we have signed with WMO to support in the implementation of AWARE, and they will make facilities and make it function from Geneva. They will support and will assure the interlinkage between early warning system and also AWARE initiative. We would like to have early action, not only early warnings. So we would like to see capacity building. We would like to see some action on the ground, financing for some project, as we can start also on capacity building with a hub in different regions in Africa. We are happy to announce that Egypt is ready to host a climate and water hub in Africa to support our friends and our colleagues in some adaptation and resilience measures. Next, please.
Next slide, please.
Slide. Okay. Maybe also as a preparatory stage, I mentioned Cairo Water Week, where we will have 4 days starting from 16 to 19 of October, big gathering, and we will have try to combine all effort to interlink water with climate to be discussed during Cairo Water Week. We will have a specific session to announce the detail about the adaptation initiative, aware initiative, and also a special preparation for the Water Day. We will announce and talk together how this day will be trying to combine all issues related to the water sector, and also propose some solution starting from financing and having also successful showcases and cooperation mechanism among different actors. Also, we will host the main high-level event for policy dialogue toward the conference 2023. We will finalize our document to be delivered to UN by end of Cairo Water Week. Also, we will have a main and core partner meeting during Cairo Water Week to finalize the program of the Water Pavilion to be announced for everyone, and to have the last minute changes and update for the thematic program. So I encourage all of you to participate either in Cairo Water Week or in the Water Pavilion, and to follow up our activities during the coming months to make water really on heart of the climate action. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imam, for being with us today and for Egypt's leadership, as you said, to bring water from the margin to the center of the COP discussions. And thanks also to my colleague Jose for this overall framing presentation. We're going to move now into our panel, and I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Daritri Kumar Sarkar. Sorry, I just need to share my video. The Deputy Secretary for the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in Bangladesh. Monsieur Soumalia Omar Gadji, Directeur Lutte contre les changements climatiques, Ministère de l'Environnement, de la Pêche et du Développement durable. And Ms. Sylvia Gaia, Wash and Environment Regional Advisor for UNICEF in East Asia and the Pacific Regional Office. We'll start with Mr. Sarkar. Mr. Sarkar, we understand that in Bangladesh, water supply and sanitation services are highly impacted by climate change. And as we're discussing today, water will have a prominent role in the discussions at COP27. Can you tell us about how your country's delegation is preparing for the COP, and in particular, how you envisage engaging on topics related to water? And would there be an opportunity for water and sanitation stakeholders to engage with the delegation in the lead up to the COP? Mr. Sarkar, over to you.
Thank you, Lucinda, for giving me the floor and inviting Bangladesh in this important session. We are really grateful for giving us the opportunity. Actually, you know, Bangladesh is a country, Bangladesh very much climate vulnerable country. And though we emit very less carbon dioxide in the air, but we are the among most of the sufferers for the effect of climate change. And you know, in Bangladesh, there is a very large coastal area. Our among 64 districts, 19 are coastal districts, and 30% of the land area of the country in the coastal area, and about 37 million people live in these coastal areas. And every year we face the excessive rainfall, longer and dry period, floods, salinity, and river erosion. So the water issues is a very crucial issue for Bangladesh due to the climate change. And due to this climate change issues, these sort of calamities or disasters, they are now increasing, and intensity of these disasters are also increasing. So the climate change issues, and especially the water, sanitation, and hygiene issues are very crucial issues for Bangladesh. And you also know Bangladesh is a land of rivers. Around 700 rivers are in Bangladesh. So we always live with the rivers, and sometimes the rivers is playing a very good role in the effective role of the economy of Bangladesh. And when this is coming from the effect of the climate change issues, we are facing the problems, hydro-related problems like the excessive rainfall, less rainfall, floods, and river erosion also. So Bangladesh put very good importance on this water, sanitation, and hygiene issues. And if I tell about the COP27 preparations, since the COP25, Bangladesh is taking a pavilion in the COP venue. In the last COP26, I attended the COP26 at Scotland, and then we played a very good role for combating the effect of climate change issues. In the global scenario, in the climate change issues, Bangladesh always try to play a pivotal role for combating the bad effect of the climate change issues. And in this scenario, if you see about the documentation of Bangladesh, Bangladesh has prepared the National Adaptation Program of Actions in 2005. Bangladesh prepared the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, BCC-SAP, in 2009. Since 2009, Bangladesh is taking different projects for combating the adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage issues through the money of its own sources. At the same time, Bangladesh also is trying to get the money from harnessing the money from the international funding bodies like GCF, GEF, Adaptation Fund also. And in this scenario, if you see about the COP26 and COP27, the Bangladesh delegation played a very good role, praiseworthy role in the negotiations of COP26. And I'm very pleased or good to inform you that I also attended the COP26 in Scotland and tried to play a good role in this scenario. And now Bangladesh is preparing for COP27. And now what will be our strategy? What will we play the role in the negotiation tables? So for that reason, Bangladesh is preparing the position paper now. We will have a position paper in different issues, and we shall place those in the COP negotiation tables. And for making this, you will be happy to know that Bangladesh prepared its COP delegation with different ministries who are associated with this. And in this scenario, I want to inform you that the Ministry of Water Resources in Bangladesh, they are a very pivotal role player in our COP27 delegation team and the position papers. And our Honorable Secretary, Ministry of Water Resources, will join the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Missouri. And at the same time, the Ministry of Water Resources, they will also place a seminar in the COP venue at the Bangladesh Pavilion. And you will be happy to know that the seminar, which is going, which will be convened by the Ministry of Water Resources Bangladesh. The title of that is Climate Adaptation for a Water Secure World, Bangladesh Perspective. And I think it will very much in line with your objective intentions. At the same time, when we prepare all these things and what will be our position, we always do the interministerial meetings, several interministerial meetings in Bangladesh, and we also convene a seminar and symposiums with people from different strata of country. So in these scenarios, people from the government sector, from the business sector, from the civil society, they are taking part in our this sort of discussion. So we are getting the inputs about the water, sanitation, and hygiene from these quarters. And when we accumulate all these informations in our position paper. And when in different sessions, this will be our view. So I confirm you that as for Bangladesh, water sanitation hygiene is very important, and we shall place in our negotiations in a very good and strong manner. And we work about the water sanitation hygiene sectors in all our demands with the adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage issue. And obviously, the work program on adaptation goal, this is a very vital issue in this COP27. So we'll also place our views on these sessions in a very good manner. And at the same time, I also, that previously, 1 minute, please, 1 minute I shall take. I have one important issue which is very good for all of you. I want to know that previously I told that the Ministry of Water Resources is attending there. At the same time, there is one international NGO, Water Aid Bangladesh. And Water Aid Bangladesh will also place a seminar in our Bangladesh pavilion. And the title of their seminar is Loss and Damage of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, was infrastructure from hazards in Bangladesh, an evidence-based case for influencing climate finance. So I think according to in line of your idea or views, the Bangladesh is taking a very good preparation to tell about the water sanitation hygiene issues in COP27. Thank you all.
Mr. Sarkar, thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. In an intersectoral delegation, a policy paper to ensure alignment across the different ministries with inputs from diverse stakeholders at the national level to make sure that those voices of communities are reaching the positioning of the national government, and then multiple entry points to emphasize the importance of these issues at the Bangladesh Pavilion, within the negotiations itself, and in the preparatory discussions that you're having at national level. I think you've given us really a lot to reflect on and think about. I'll come back during the questions and answers, but now I'd like to turn to Mr. Gadji. Mr. Gadji, I understand that in the mid-September meeting of the SWA committee in Chad, you gave a brief summary of the preparations for COP27, and the Secretary General of the Environment Ministry talked about the Prime Minister's decree establishing a committee to prepare for COP27. And we know that Chad is one of the few countries which has given a very central place to water in the strategic documents on climate, like the NDC and the NAP, both of which were updated in 2021. So given all of this, can you tell us more about how your government is preparing for COP27 and how water and sanitation will be integrated into those preparatory discussions?
All right, thank you, Lucinda. Thank you to everybody who's attending this webinar. I'll be speaking probably in French because I'm a French native speaker. That will be better for me to express the ideas and the communication about my home country.
Vous êtes bienvenue.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Merci beaucoup pour l'introduction.
Thank you very much for your introduction. As you've already said, Chad is one of the few countries which has ratified the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. We are preparing for our upcoming participation in Sharm el-Sheikh, participation to the COP27. This is a typically African event. I think it will be decisive because it will be a key event in terms of advocacy, as well as the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and to showcase what we're doing at the national level. As you've clearly said already, our commitment is clear. We've recently revised our NDC. to show that water is one of the priority sectors at the national level. It's the best way for us to adapt to climate change. And we're preparing to take part in the next COP27. As you know, we've set up an interministerial committee following the Prime Minister's decree and this committee will be dedicated to set up our national delegation for the participation to the COP27. This committee is divided up into 3 commissions: the technical commission, which will be overseeing the technical aspect of the preparatory work for the COP27. This committee is currently working on mapping out all the different projects that we have undertaken for the water sector when it comes to climate change adaptation. So we will be working on the different options and presenting different options and initiatives we've launched, which are specific to the water sector. The second committee is to do with communication. It's mostly the work of civil society organizations. These organizations have already started some groundwork in preparation for the COP27. They've started a caravan. It's an operation that takes place over 2 years. And the last committee is to do and the caravan that was launched for the by the civil society organizations is trying to reach out to the most vulnerable communities. That's what they are trying to do through this caravan initiative. We're trying to advocate for more social justice. As you know, that Chad, in some of our regions, we've lost about 90% of our natural resources following climate change. So we're heavily impacted by climate change. So this is one of the initiatives that was launched in terms of communication. And we've tried to also focus via our third committee in terms of what we want to achieve for advocacy to fight climate change. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Gadji, pour cette présentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gadji, for your presentation. You've insisted on the political will shown by the Chad Republic, and that's essential to achieve some substantial advancements to fulfill your sustainable development goals. Thank you very much for having explained that water and sanitation is part and parcel of social justice, and obviously climate justice as well. Thank you so much for your intervention.
Change back into English. Now over to Ms. Gaia. UNICEF is a core partner of the Water and Climate Pavilion at COP27. And together with the SWA and WHO, we're responsible for the coordination of the discussions that will turn around climate resilient water supplies, sanitation, health, and sustainable development at the Water Pavilion. And since we're discussing potential entry points for water in the COP27 discussions and negotiations, can you tell us a bit more about UNICEF's views on this and the potential role that water and sanitation stakeholders can play in countries to support or brief the delegations who will be in attendance at COP? Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you, Lucinda, and apologies, I am not going to put the video because I have a very limited connectivity and it could be really shut it down. So colleagues, from our side, really we applaud Egypt for bringing water so strongly into the COP this year. and we are super supportive of this. I think it's very important to have in mind that we have different types of countries that are represented in the climate change negotiations. One key group is the developed countries, the post-industrial economies, who are really leading in most cases the net zero emissions and 1.5 temperature goals. And a second group of nations are those who, in pursuit of their national economic interest, are resisting these mitigation measures prescribed, but are indeed asking for priority to be given to adaptation. Luckily, this year COP27 is branded as the African COP and as the adaptation COP. And we need to remember that in Africa, there are millions of people living in the overlap of lack of access to water supply and sanitation. And at the same time, they are highly exposed to climate impacts. So people really live in a high level of vulnerability. And we have done some studies around that. So from a water supply and sanitation point of view, we need that climate planners and water managers understand better the interconnection between climate change, water as a resource, and of course, the basic social services that depend on it. Importantly, safely manage drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. Sometimes climate planners tell us that it's not very straightforward for them to understand this link between climate change and sanitation. So we really need to explain them a little bit better. As you know, UNICEF has a very strong country presence, and over the last years, we are working strongly to increase climate into water supply and sanitation programming. And the first step to do that is to widen the scope of the partners we work with. So I would say, I'm confidently saying that we are now much more in touch with climate planners and policymakers in countries, and we are willing to really coordinate with other WASH stakeholders to understand better how country delegations to COP this year are, who are them, and brief them with the adaptation needs of basic services as well as opportunities they represent to build community resilience to climate change. Because of course, these basic social services as water and sanitation are key for community resilience. Now, with this, I want to share that in our region, in East Asia and Pacific, I have already touched with the UNICEF colleagues to start moving in these directions and start briefing the COP delegations to assure that we can contribute through this country presence in COP, in the discussions, to really bring the issue of the need to include the social services like as water and sanitation as key for adaptation agenda. We are dreaming on a COP outcome document that mentions the importance of water supply and sanitation to achieve the global goal on adaptation. So hopefully we are a little bit closer of making this happen. Thank you very much, Lucinda, and over to you.
Sylvia, thank you so much for sharing that information about how UNICEF is supporting partners to engage with the COP and to work towards integrating more consideration of water and sanitation as fundamental to resilience and adaptation. We've been monitoring the chat, and I don't think any questions have come up yet, but we're also running short of time. So I will say that SWA is here to help. Jose Gesti, who was presenting at the beginning of this webinar, he'll put his email address in the chat. And if you have questions in the follow-up to the webinar, I invite you to email him those questions, and we are ready to work with you and your country teams, your multi-stakeholder country teams, in order to support you in preparing for COP27. We'll be there in just over a month. So if there are no questions, I'm just checking the chat again, but if there are no immediate questions coming up, I will turn it over to Paul Deverell, who is the chair of our high-level political dialogue work group, to offer some reflections on the interventions that we've heard today. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lucinda. I'm not sure if anyone can see me. I'm watching you and I can see the slides, but I don't necessarily need the slides at this point, so maybe we could take them down. That's grand. Yeah, so listen, first of all, a big thanks in particular to the participants in today's meeting, especially Dr. Iman. That's the first time I've actually seen you, Dr. Iman. What a huge amount of work you have done and are doing. And we absolutely applaud you for the focus on water that you have maintained and reinforced throughout the preparation of this COP. So brilliant, brilliant, brilliant work. And we're very proud to be associated with that work. No doubt SWA is, and many others are as well. So thank you very much for that. Also, our three panelists from Bangladesh, from Chad and Sylvia, I guess from Bangkok. Some really important insights that I'm going to mention there. So I've been asked us to summarize this quite quickly. So here's some key points. The first one is preparation is everything. Here, a well-prepared delegation at a COP is worth a huge amount. A poorly prepared delegation at the COP is frankly probably not worth being there. So really help the water, us in the water and the water sector have a responsibility to ensure that the COP delegations that go to Sharm el-Sheikh are as really properly briefed on issues around water and WASH. And it is our responsibility to make that happen. Learning from COP26, as already has been mentioned. So learn from the experience of COP26. That process. The second is, remember those four objectives: mitigation, adaptation, finance, and above all, collaboration. Yeah, I'm going to focus a little bit on the collaboration bit because SWA is all about collaboration. And if we think about what Bangladesh said, what Chad said, and what Sylvia said, they really focused on the collaboration side between, firstly, between government and don't forget that example of government leadership from Chad, by the way. Government, civil society, water aid was, I think, mentioned, but there's many, many other examples of that, reaching right down to communities as well, which is really, really interesting to see, and business. So let's get that collaboration right. And then there's another form of collaboration, which is all about collaboration between sectors. Yeah. So no one sector is going to solve climate. Yeah. WASH and water, if you like, we can regard that as one sector. Use the opportunity to reaching out to agriculture, to energy, to health, to education, and to others. Yeah. This is not about one pavilion. This is about a community of pavilions with lots and lots of networks and links between them. So if you get a chance, think about collaboration and reach out to your colleagues in other sectors to say, well, what are you doing to brief our delegation going to Sharm el-Sheikh, and how can we work together? Really, really important, I think. Maybe the last point I'll mention is going back to that Chad caravan. I would dearly love to hear a bit more about that. What an amazing initiative. Yeah, because we don't want the COP to be a whole load of officials, slightly more men than women, that's appalling to start with, dressed up in suits and ties and posh blouses and skirts and whatever, forgetting that they're trying to represent the interests in particular of poor people who are the most severely affected by climate change. So the idea of that caravan, think about that. If Chad can do that, then what can you do? Yeah, think imaginatively, use your civil society, see what you can do. There's still time to do it. And we're really interested to hear from you on that one. So finally, just preparation is key, but just as preparation is key for the COP, it's also really key for this meeting. So I'd just like to thank SWA, and in particular, the rarely seen interpreters. I just want to see, can our French interpreter pop up possibly so we can actually get to see you, because we hardly ever see you. So it'd be really useful to say big thanks, totally fluid translation as we learn to expect from SWA's webinars. There's another one this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I see many of you are from Asia, but many of you from Africa as well. Almost 100 participants in this meeting. But there's another one to catch up with maybe a few more countries later on in the day. That's it really. So thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me, Lucinda. Thank you all for participating. And for those of you who can, there's a record on this one, or you could join the one at 3 o'clock as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. Just to clarify, it's at 4 o'clock Central European time, 3 o'clock UK time, just to be clear. Thank you everyone for being here. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Thank you, Lucinda. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.